Hello, everyone. Welcome to our decentralized future. My name is Adam. I am the creator of gFam.live, which is a social media platform where creators can earn from a decentralized source. So they can earn from anyone. And we've got Andrew, who is the CEO of the Koinos Group. I think you're somewhat decentralized. You do things in decentralized world.
Yeah, well, we're trying to build essentially a decentralized computer with no fees. So the Koinos we're building the Koinos blockchain, which for people who have heard of Ethereum, it's like that, but faster, more accessible, and of course, no fees. We'll be launching the testnet soon. So that's a really exciting milestone. And then after the testnet, it's on to the mainnet.
What I wanted to talk about today, though, was politics, everyone's favorite conversational topic. I've been thinking a lot about governance tokens in the past week or so. My favorite blockchain game, Splinterlands, announced their own governance token that's going to be airdropped to players, which I thought was really interesting. And yeah, like I think governance tokens are really interesting because they don't have that financial aspect, but it's more about a decentralized way for people to make decisions. And I think governance tokens might fit very nicely on the Koinos network because there are no fees. I think if you have a governance token, but every transaction is costing people money, that takes a lot of value out of that whole process. It's like, well, I want to participate in the voting, but I can't afford the fee that comes with that potentially.
Yeah, if you're going to have a governance token, having it on a feeless blockchain, it would unlock a lot of value in that application. But it's funny, you can say that about literally every application. Like
Right.
people, like every day I talk to people and they're like, oh, it would be great on a feeless blockchain, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like, yeah, when you eliminate fees, you just unlock all of these possibilities and everything just becomes a lot more usable. And that's really, been our focus is usability of blockchain technology. It has to be usable and, usable to developers. And that means enabling developers to build applications that are usable to users, and very much thinking in terms of, okay, what are people actually going to tolerate using? And fees just really make things inherently unusable. Now, to the topic of governance tokens, I think what I find interesting in the topic is not going to be what I think people would expect. I don't know how, I think there's some kind of faulty assumptions in the very concept of a governance token. I think the very concept illustrates a phenomenon that I've observed that I think has flaws, which is that people want to make everything into a token. Everything has to be a token. The money is such an inherently compelling concept, and money is just tokens. Like increasingly, the difference between money and tokens is just disintegrating as everything becomes digital. But like all money has always been tokens in that it's just this unique fungible thing. It's just these fungible things, and they have like narratives behind them. And so what we've done in the crypto space is create these technologies that just dramatically lower the barriers to creating all types of money. And so the problem is, so you can substitute token for money. And so there is no semantic difference between saying governance token and governance money. So, okay, we have Koinos, we launch a separate governance token. It's a token, which means it's tradable. Otherwise it ceases to become fungible. And so it's not really a token. Okay. And, you look at general purpose protocols, they they attain a value anywhere, hundreds of millions to billions of dollars, and now you've got a token, and that token conveys governance rights. You don't think that token's going to get a value, and you don't think that the consequences of that will be basically devastating to whatever you were trying to accomplish in terms of governance. You're wrong. You're just wrong. So,
well, I guess EOS was a kind of a good example of that, right? Like EOS had this year-long distribution of their token, and because it's a proof of stake blockchain, I guess they kind of assumed that like everyone would have this opportunity to buy that token and to like develop their stake. And then, I think like a vast majority of the tokens were all bought up by 10 or 20 groups that ended up with the vast majority of tokens. So even though it was supposed to be super decentralized, it basically just got gobbled up by the people with the resources to gobble it up that were interested in. And so EOS doesn't have the value that it probably should have because it accidentally got centralized.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of, whenever you have a system that isn't working, there's usually a lot of things that weren't designed properly and aren't functioning properly and are all interacting with one another in really complicated ways. There are numerous flaws in how EOS was designed. My pet favorite is effectively that they didn't develop mana, right? So they developed markets for network resources. It's connected to kind of the point that I was making about governance tokens. The network has a limited amount of RAM, and that RAM is highly needed because we designed EOS using memory mapped files, which basically use RAM. Okay, but there's also disk and then there's network bandwidth. So, okay, it's a great way to solve these problems, markets. Okay, let's create a market. Okay, well, now speculators are going to hoard market resources so that the price goes up, and so now it's unusable because of that. You create a market, you're going to have market conditions. You create money, you're going to have the consequences that result from creating money. If you want, I think the most interesting topic with respect to governance that I don't think people think about enough is simplicity, the importance of simplicity. It matters in all parts of the system, obviously. Simplicity is key everywhere. But it's especially key in governance depending on your goals. If your goal is that everybody is somehow involved and influential over network governance, then it has to be simple enough for everybody to use. And in fact, I would go a step farther and say that it should be baked in to the very usage of the system so that as you do things, it impacts governance. Anytime you say, here's how our governance system works, you do X that is different than the stuff you just wanted to do, you are immediately chopping by 90% the number of people who are going to be involved in governance. You're immediately centralizing your situation because you're introducing friction.
Right.
Oh, vote. Okay, inform yourself, educate yourself. This is how people subtly accumulate power and exert control, is by introducing complexity and making it harder and harder to participate. Creating a separate governance token is part and parcel to that. Okay, all you have to do is acquire this token. Wait a minute, I just wanted to be part of the future of commerce and interaction. Now I have to buy this other token and that token and then this and then that. We won't have a governance token. I think the way we think about governance and governance design And the token you hold as a stakeholder in the platform should convey governance powers and give you the option to exert influence over governance if you would like to. But I think that the most interesting governance solutions, they're undesigned solutions. They're taking away the need to think and exert governance decisions. So I think I could give you like a specific example. Okay, that on Koinos, we can add any behavior to the blockchain without a hard fork. Okay, how much of governance in other blockchains is about hard forking?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the Hive blockchain, it's the most part of it, really.
Ethereum.
Yeah.
Ethereum too. So it is, when you have hard forks, they are the limiting factor for progress of a blockchain. And so they are what governance is about. And this is, I think this is a super interesting and powerful example, right, of the whole issue, because nobody, in all the conversations about blockchain governance, right, you never hear anyone suggest that the solution might be getting rid of the hard forks.
Right.
We'll make a token. We'll make a token. I got an idea. Let's get rid of hard forks. Now, that's not, there's no governance to be done. I'm being hyperbolic. Like there will be hard forks. There'll be more like regular and like objective. It'll just be like, okay, how can we increase the efficiency of this thing? We have these behaviors running in the VM. They would be a lot faster and cheaper running natively. Okay, let's build these, let's hard fork in these native implementations, but it will be an objective process, right? So now it's a fundamentally different beast. Yes, you need governance, but what is the governance doing, right? And so, and another another interesting example, I think, is that, speaking of Hive, and I'm not trashing Hive, but just the distinction between a general purpose platform and an application specific platform has governance implications, because on a general purpose platform, a developer can execute their own code on the network. And so now, with respect to that code, governance is much less of an impediment to their ability to build their decentralized application, because if they have this snippet of code, they don't have to beg the blockchain developers to add it to the blockchain. They can just write it as a smart contract. And if you're feeless, you're not introducing fees into your user experience. So you're basically getting the benefits of a native implementation. Like on Koinos, you'll be getting the benefits of a native implementation without having to have it baked into the blockchain itself, because this is where WASM WebAssembly becomes critical and so important, because that smart contract is compiled to WASM. Even though it's running in a virtual machine, it's still running super fast. And because Koinos will have mana, you're not having the fees. And so in my opinion, these are the actual behaviors that developers want from their decentralized application. They don't care how it gets accomplished, whether it's baked into the blockchain itself or whether it's running in a virtual machine. And I bet you $1 gazillion that they will always prefer to have it running in a virtual machine where they can upgrade it whenever they want. And if it's 99% as fast as a native implementation, they're good with that. So you see, like, we have undesigned the need for such active governance because A, dramatically reduce the need to hard fork, B, give developers smart contracts that enable them to run whatever code they want on the network. And C, or three, I forget whether I was using letters or numbers, the fees do not get introduced into the process. And so you can still have a great user experience, because I think that's often why people are looking to get things implemented natively in the blockchain, is because then it doesn't have fees. So that's one of the many reasons why implementing Mana is so critical. And one day I look forward to, we need to talk more about Mana, because I'm getting like re-excited about Mana. But so, what we're shooting for with Koinos is this purely like neutral platform where you can come in and you can build whatever world you want, and you don't need to be worried about how the platform works and is governed. These are all negative signs about the design of the system. If you're saying, well, how does governance work? You should just be saying, wow, this platform works great. Yeah. It's not imposing any ideology or limitations on me. It just lets me do what I want to do and lets my users do what I want, what they want to do. You don't ask how internet governance works. There is some stuff. There are these nonprofits, and I don't know. It's a complicated, crazy mess. But they must do a pretty good job, because you don't fucking ask, because It just works because it's neutral. And so that's what we're striving for with our governance, is how do we design this stuff so that people can use it? People don't need to worry about governance, but at the same time, by not thinking about governance or being involved in governance, we're not giving power to other people or some specific group of people. How do we accomplish all of those things? And it takes a holistic design to the system, right? Like Mana plays a part. The fact that you can, like you said, the fact that you can perform feeless transactions, that you can participate in the network without losing money, is critical to getting people involved. But it interconnects with the modular upgradability. It interacts with the smart contracting capability. And when you look at all of the different components and how they work together, the emergent properties of the system are just fundamentally different than taking a system that is functioning poorly and imagining how you would improve that through an iterative process. You take a shitty system and you iterate it, it just gets like shittier and shittier. Like everyone thinks it's going to get better, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And everyone's just confused the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can see that with like when companies make bizarre decisions, like what possible person thought that was a good idea? But you don't know like what they started with and where they like the process that they went through to get to that terrible idea.
Yeah, it's funny. And one interesting example, like gold can come out of that. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. Everybody on Hive and Steam and the Koinos community, like they take the idea of delegation so for granted, right? We're like, this is so obviously a good thing, right? And you go to other blockchains and they haven't even heard of the process. Yeah. And why is that? It's because at first, because Steam has human readable usernames, they have a cost. And so at first, Steam at Inc. was just handing out 15 Steam. Yeah. And delegation, it was simultaneously one of those weird solutions that might not make any sense to people outside, but it's based on these historical decisions that got made where we're giving out free money and we're growing, but we're losing money. Okay, we need delegation. And delegation is great. It's a great concept. It's a super important concept for creating usable decentralized applications. And there's countless examples of things like that in Koinos that were like, based on our experience at Steam, this is what we would have fixed. This is what we would have done differently. And that's great. But when you're at the organization, when you're dealing with the architecture, it's a nightmare, and you wind up making decisions that are not ideal but are necessary.
Yeah.
And that's why I think people were probably pretty surprised when we left Steam and we decided to build our blockchain completely from scratch, because that seems really hard, but they don't realize how hard it would have been to take that existing architecture, whether it was Steam or EOS,
Yeah.
and make it into what we want it to be. We would be burdened by all of that debt, and it was just too much. It could have theoretically not been too much, but when we looked at the whole design, the resource model on EOS, just too many things, the use of memory mapped files, it would have, so we would have had to change everything. And so just starting from scratch, it gives you that freedom. And yeah, it takes a little longer, so we've been at it a year, and we're now at testnet, but we're very happy with the decision.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I like one of the things that I thought would be interesting about governance would be, like people actually making decisions on little things that affect their communities or whatever. But I think you've really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, like, how can you guarantee that you tie someone's vote to a person? Because, like, as you said, like, if it ends up with a value, then you might just get rich people buying up everyone's essentially votes or their voting token. So yeah, I haven't really figured out how you would get around that. I've noticed with the governance platforms that I've seen, like Uniswap had like a vote in the last couple of weeks, and 100% of the voting tokens voted one way. So that just leads me to think that the question that Uniswap asked was so obviously weighted in one direction. And I think a lot of people would just be like, oh, well, how do you want us to vote? I don't care enough about this to go against the grain. So I guess I haven't personally seen governance tokens work the way I thought they would have worked. Yes.
Well, yeah, interesting. Yeah, well, here's how I think it's going to work. Here's how it's going to, maybe I can give some insights into how we're planning to design Koinos governance. But basically, the way you want governance to work, I think, is you need to have capital. You need to be able to, the system needs to be able to identify long-term stakeholders, developers and users, same class, and block producers or infrastructure providers. These are the three critical classes in a blockchain. Capital, users, and developers are a type of user, and block producers, infrastructure providers.
Yeah.
And these three classes have divergent interests. This is the problem that no other blockchains are really thinking about. And so instead they just say, oh, it's if you have tokens, you're a stakeholder, your incentives are aligned. And the problem is that no, there are distinct classes within that group. And because you have not codified that distinction on chain, they collude off chain. And so what you need is a way of enabling the blockchain to identify which accounts are associated with capital, users, and block producers. And what this enables is them to collude effectively against the other classes, which creates checks and balances. And so, for example, I can give one example is how would the blockchain identify users? How would the Koinos blockchain identify users? Well, the central concept of Koinos is that if you hold coin, the instant you buy coin, you should be able to perform feeless transactions. And in order to facilitate that, the blockchain has coded within it this idea that within your coin is a set amount of mana. And so the more coin you have, the more mana you have, the more free transactions you have. Now, What you won't be able to do with those coin is mine blocks or earn a yield.
Yeah.
Those will be separate systems that participating in them will deprive you of the ability to perform feeless transactions, right? So now what do we have? We have mana, which is a way for the blockchain to objectively assess who is a user and which users are going to have the most mana. Can you guess?
No, developers.
Correct.
Should have just backed
Right?
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you got there. You got there quick. I put you on the spot. It felt like a long time. You got there quick. Exactly. So on the one hand, users will have mana.
Yeah.
They will have mana delegated to them. They will buy coin. They will have mana. Developers obviously have more at stake in a blockchain. They spend years developing, right? Okay, how do we measure this? Okay, what complicated system can we put in there? No complicated system. They'll have a lot of mana. The more invested that they're in, the more mana that they'll have. And they're sacrificing because they're sacrificing an opportunity cost because they're not using that coin to mine blocks or to earn a yield through staking. Then there will be the people who are staking, and then there will be the people who are mining. And so this gives us three classes which can be used to within the governance system. What was the question?
I guess it was how you ensure that the right people are voting.
Right. Oh, right. So the cool thing I thought about while you were asking that question is, is the best solutions are simple and fractal. And decentralization and fractalness are often like super related. So what do I mean? When your users are using Koinos, right? They will be using your smart contracts. Your smart contracts will be upgradable in band. You do not need us you do not need Koinos to hard fork in order to upgrade your smart contract. So what will people really care about from a governance perspective? They will care about your smart contract, not Koinos. And at the system level, what we're doing is at all times doing as much as possible to minimize the amount, the degree to which they need to care about what's happening at the system level. So what it's really about is how you design governance. And like I said at the beginning, right, what you want to be doing is that the users, just by using the platform, they're participating in governance. And it's the same with your app, right? They should be using the app. And based on how they're using the app, that should impact your governance.
Right.
And I believe that good apps will actually mirror that tripartite governance system that I just outlined for you, because it'll be the same dynamic. There will be people who simply want to invest in your growth as an app. And for them, they will want a long-term investment vehicle that provides a yield. And you will be able to mimic our system for that, what we call bonds, right? So you could have gFam bonds, right? I even think that applications will take our Mana smart contract module, copy the code, and tweak it for their implementation, right? Because you want to have feeless transactions within your app too, but you will also have additional expenses and costs that you want to kind of like integrate into your system without introducing fees, right? So you'll have you could have gFam Mana too. And this is the thing that I want to talk about in the future, maybe even write some articles about. And you might also have an equivalent of mining. You might mimic these three classes too, right? And so I, as the user, right, I will predominantly have gFam coin for the mana, for the using of your app. And then I'm using your app. And so you, as the developer of your system, are going, look at their usage. The governance should be looking at their usage, and then the long-term capital holders and the miners. I guess the miners will basically be probably people who are revising the smart contract. They're probably, you know, but so now what you have is the long-term capital holders and say the infrastructure providers in terms of your app. They're looking at the user behavior and they're saying, well, as the long-term capital holder is going, I want us to grow more. I want us to deliver more value. Look at that behavior. Look at that behavior. We need to change this part of the smart contract, that part of the smart contract. And the miner is going, yeah, I want to grow too. And if my upgrades won't get accepted by you, long-term stakeholder, because you see what the users are doing, and you have a vested interest in satisfying them, now we are aligning the incentives of the classes within the system so as to maximize value creation. That's governance to me. It's not a complicated system where you introduce all of this cognitive load into your users' minds and say, become a politician now. That's the absolute worst outcome, right? but now imagine all of this that I'm describing replicated across 10,000 applications, all of which are running on top of Koinos. And now you have decentralized governance. And now you have all of those developers who have systems, who have governance systems and diverse governance systems. There will be a variety, and there will be good and bad. And now it's those people who will be exerting some influence over system level governance, right? So now we get to the fractalization that I was trying to get at, where you don't have top down governance, where it's the Koinos blockchain developers telling everybody how the system is going to be, and then you figuring out how it works. Instead, you've got thousands of developers who have their own governance mechanisms, and emerging out of that governance that is what influences the lower level governance of the system. And so it's, you get all of the information from all of those users, all of those long-term investors, all of those infrastructure providers, and then all of them are going to coordinate their actions at the lower level. The long-term investors from your app will connect with the long-term investors from other apps about what they want done at the system level. And the same for the infrastructure providers, who are the people you want to be getting involved in right? You're creating these areas of expertise. You're giving people the right place for their skill set and their interest, and you're giving them the tools to maximally exert that influence. And that applies to the users as well. But when you look at what the users are doing, right, they're just using, but by using, they're exerting their influence, and that influence is trickling down, to use a terrible phrase, to the base level, but in an organic way. So yeah, that's how I think about governance.
Yeah, I mean, that is really exciting.
The best governance is no governance, right?
I mean, if everything's just working. Yeah, I think this also, it kind of highlights some funding opportunities that I hadn't really thought about with Koinos before, in terms of, like, gFam is basically going through like funding at the moment, and it's a massive hassle, and basically you have to find people that are willing to fund you. Where I think if you are basically able to open, your system up so that people can bring capital to your system based on what you intend to build, that could be really exciting for a lot of developers who just cannot afford to build the thing that they want to build up front. So I think there's a lot of potential there, but I want to thank you for your time, Andrew. I hope you have a great day. I hope it's very sunny for you, and we'll talk to you again hopefully next week.
Sounds good. Great chatting.
Awesome.